They laughed, not just a chuckle. That cruel, full-bodied laughter people share when they think the target can't hear them. I was halfway down the hallway, moving slower than usual, my stitches pulling under the thin cotton of my hospital gown. My son said, "She can't even open a jar anymore. What's the point of keeping her at home?" Then my daughter-in-law added, "She's practically furniture now." Expensive, useless furniture? I froze beside the doorway. The smell of reheated curry drifted from the kitchen, the same meal I'd taught her to make years ago. I used to hover behind her, proud she wanted to learn. That night, the same scent made me nauseous. They laughed again, louder this time. My daughter, my youngest, who'd always been the quiet one, giggled and said, "Mum's just dramatic. She loves the attention." That one landed harder than the rest. Not because of what she said, but because of the ease in her tone. As if my pain was a performance she'd grown bored of. I remember gripping the wall to steady myself. My hand trembled, but not from weakness. It was something else, something older. When the laughter faded, I went back to my room, closed the door quietly, and sat on the edge of the bed. I'd survived 2 surgeries, one husband's death, and 40 years of raising children who now thought of me as a burden. But nothing had prepared me for that sound. My own flesh and blood finding humor in my helplessness. My name is Margaret, though most people just call me Maggie. I turned 65 last spring, a week after my hip surgery. I used to be a nurse, spent half my life caring for other people, strangers with infections, mothers in labor, children with fevers that scared their parents half to death. When my husband died in his 40s, a heart attack right in our kitchen, I held the family together with little more than determination and night shifts. I worked double hours to pay the mortgage. I sold my jewelry to cover college tuition. I packed lunches and left notes in their backpacks. Small scraps of encouragement written in the middle of exhaustion. I thought if I gave enough, they'd grow up kind. Now I see kindness doesn't pass through blood. The surgery had gone well, according to the doctors, but recovery was slow. My body didn't listen like it used to. I needed help bathing, cooking, even standing up sometimes. Asking for help felt like swallowing glass, but I told myself it was temporary, that my children would understand. They did not. I had moved into my eldest son's house during recovery because he insisted. "It'll be easier," he said. "We'll take care of you." I should have known better. Easier had always been code for control in this family. At first, I ignored the small signs. How they'd roll their eyes when I asked for pain medication. How they'd lower their voices when I entered a room. My daughter-in-law started, rearranging my belongings, calling it tidying up. My granddaughter stopped visiting my room altogether, whispering that Grandma smells like hospitals. I wanted to correct her, to remind her that hospitals smell like people being kept alive. But that night, that laughter, stripped something from me I hadn't realized I still had, the illusion that I mattered to them. I didn't cry, I thought I would, but tears didn't come. Instead, I sat in silence, tracing the wrinkles on my hands, the same hands that had once held theirs through fevers, scraped knees, nightmares. I felt like a ghost haunting my own family. It's strange how quickly love can curdle into something unrecognizable. For years, I believed their distance came from stress, from busy lives, from the way adulthood pulls families apart. But no, distance had been growing like mold, quietly feeding on the spaces I refused to look at. That night, as the house went quiet, I made a decision, not out of revenge, out of necessity. I couldn't spend whatever years I had left apologizing for existing. I thought of my late husband, how he'd once said, "Maggie, you give too much. One day you'll have nothing left to give." I'd laughed then, brushing it off as his pessimism. Turns out, he was right. The well had run dry. So I started counting backward, from everything I'd given to everything I'd lost. My youth, my savings, my health, my peace. Each one gone, swallowed by obligation disguised as love. And in that silence, I made myself a promise. If they saw me as useless, I'd show them how dangerous useless could be. That night, I slept for the first time in weeks. Not peacefully, but with purpose. I didn't tell anyone about what I'd overheard that night. Not the nurse who came to check my bandages. Not my neighbour who called to wish me well. I carried it like a stone in my chest, heavy and unspoken. You learn to do that after enough years. Carry the weight quietly, so it doesn't embarrass anyone else. I spent those next days in my room mostly, pretending to nap when they walked by, pretending not to hear when my daughter-in-law's voice dipped to a whisper. I listened to the clatter of plates, the laughter from the television, life happening just fine without me. And I thought back to all the years I'd worked to keep that life possible. When my husband, Daniel, died, the kids were 12, 9, and 6. I remember sitting in the funeral home with their small hands in mine, trying to stay upright. My son, the eldest, had his father's stubborn jaw. He asked if Daddy was asleep. I lied, told him he'd gone somewhere peaceful. I wanted to believe that too. Grief didn't give me time to be weak. Bills don't pause for mourning. I went back to the hospital 2 weeks later. Nights were the worst. Those long, sterile hours filled with the sound of heart monitors and people trying to die quietly. I'd come home when the sky turned pink, collapse into bed for 3 hours, then wake to pack lunches, braid hair, and smile like everything was fine. I don't know if my children ever noticed how little I slept. Maybe they thought mothers run on something other than rest, like guilt or duty. There's a particular exhaustion that settles in your bones when you've been needed too much. It eats your softness first. I used to hum when I cooked. Somewhere along the way, I stopped. My mother once told me, "Don't raise your children expecting gratitude. Love is its own return." I repeated that like scripture for decades. But she also used to sit at the kitchen table after my father left, staring at the window long after dark, her coffee gone cold. She never said it aloud, but I saw it, the quiet ache of being used up. She died alone in a nursing home. I swore that would never be me. Maybe that's the curse of women like us. We try to fix our mother's endings and walk straight into the same story. My middle child, Emma, reminds me of myself in my 30s. Capable, sharp, exhausted. She calls once in a while, says she's too busy to visit. She loves her work, her independence. But her words always sound rehearsed, like she's keeping a safe distance. When she was little, she used to sit beside me while I sewed, watching quietly. Once, she asked, "Do you ever get tired of doing everything alone?" I told her no. I lied again. And then there's Lily, my youngest, sweet, silent Lily, who laughed at me that night. She was my shadow growing up, used to crawl into my bed when storms scared her. When her friends teased her in school, I'd write her notes and tuck them into her lunchbox. Little reminders that she mattered. I still remember her handwriting the day she left for college. "I'll make you proud, Mom." I believed her. Somewhere between then and now, pride turned into pity. I see now how patterns pass like heirlooms. My mother endured. I endured. And I taught my daughters to endure too. Not how to fight. Not how to demand kindness. Just how to survive without complaint. That's what we called strength. But endurance without boundaries isn't strength. It's surrender. When I looked in the mirror after my surgery, I barely recognized the woman staring back. The scar running down my hip wasn't just from the knife. It was a line dividing my life into before and after. Before, giving, forgiving, waiting. After, whatever comes next, even if it means being alone. One morning, about a week after the laughter, I found an old photo album in the closet, the pages stuck together from years of neglect. There I was, 25, holding baby Michael in my arms, smiling like I'd figured life out. Next page, Daniel at the beach, the girls building sandcastles. Next, me in my uniform, hair tucked under a nurse's cap, exhaustion hidden behind practiced gentleness. I stared at that younger version of myself for a long time. I wanted to warn her. Tell her that love, if unbalanced, becomes hunger. That one day her own children would treat her like a relic of someone they outgrew. But photos can't hear truth. They only preserve hope. I closed the album and realized I'd built my entire life on the belief that selflessness would be remembered. It isn't. People remember convenience. They remember what you gave them, not what it cost you. That night, I dreamt of my mother again. She was sitting at her table, that same coffee cup in her hands. Only this time she looked at me and said, "It's not too late to leave the table, Maggie." I woke up with the taste of bitter coffee in my mouth and a thought that wouldn't leave. Maybe the only way to stop being devoured is to stop serving yourself up. And that's when the wound began to close. Not healed, not yet, but no longer bleeding. I didn't know it then, but I was already preparing for the first confrontation, the one where silence would finally stop protecting them. It happened 2 weeks after the laughter. My stitches had started to heal. The pain dulled to a slow throb that matched my heartbeat. I could walk without leaning on the cane for a few steps now, though I still kept it close, partly for balance, partly for courage. That morning I asked them all to dinner. The house went quiet for a beat, like they weren't sure they'd heard right. "I'll cook," I said, forcing a smile. "Just something simple. Family meal." They agreed out of politeness or curiosity. Maybe both. Cooking hurt, but it was a familiar kind of pain. The ache in my hip, the heat from the stove, the sting when I bent too far. It grounded me. I chopped onions and remembered when those same children used to tug on my apron strings, begging to lick the spoon. I wondered when the kitchen had stopped being our meeting place and turned into my stage for servitude. They gathered around 7. Michael, the eldest, came first, wearing that same confident smirk that once made me proud and now made me tired. His wife followed, perfume sharp enough to sting my throat. Emma arrived next, her voice brisk, all business. Lily was last, earbuds in, eyes down, already half gone. I served them stew. The silence felt heavy, like something sacred was about to end. When they started eating, I said, "I wanted to talk about something." Michael barely looked up. "If this is about your doctor's appointment, we've got it handled." "No," I said, keeping my voice even. "It's about that night." Lily froze, spoon halfway to her mouth. Emma frowned. "What night?" "The night I heard you all laughing," I said. "About me. About being useless." The words dropped between us like a plate shattering. Michael leaned back in his chair, that little smirk flickering. "Mum, you must have misunderstood. We were just joking." "Yeah," Emma added, quickly. "You're taking things too seriously again. You always—" I cut her off. "Do I?" That surprised her. I'd never interrupted before. Not once. "You think I imagined the sound of my own children laughing at me?" I said. My voice didn't rise, but it sharpened. "Do you know what that does to a person? Hearing the people they raised talk like they're already gone? They all looked everywhere but at me. I gave you everything I had," I went on, each word slow and deliberate. "Every extra shift, every sleepless night, every piece of myself. I thought I was building a family. Turns out I was just maintaining one." Michael sighed, impatient. "Mum, we've been under a lot of stress. You can't hold one bad conversation against us." "One?" I said quietly. "Michael, you've been rolling your eyes at me since the day I moved in. Your wife treats me like I'm a broken appliance. Emma barely calls. And Lily," I turned to her, "you used to hold my hand when you were scared. When did I become something to laugh at?" Lily's lip trembled, but she said nothing. Michael's tone hardened. "Look, we're doing our best, but you need to stop acting like we owe you for raising us. Parents don't get medals for doing their job." I stared at him. That sentence, casual, dismissive, landed like a slap. "I never wanted medals," I said. "Just respect." He shrugged. "Respect is earned, Mom. Maybe stop making everything about you." That was it. The shift. The moment I stopped hoping for understanding. I pushed my chair back slowly, the cane scraping the floor. "You're right. I said. Respect is earned. And I've just realized I've been giving mine to the wrong people. Michael frowned, confused. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing you'll understand tonight. I gathered my plate, carried it to the sink. My hands didn't shake anymore. Behind me, Emma muttered something about drama. My daughter-in-law whispered, "She's losing it." I dried my hands and turned to face them. "You think I'm weak?" I said softly. "Because I'm old, because I need help, because I don't shout. But you forget. I survived things you couldn't even name. You were still in diapers when I buried your father. You think a few scars make me fragile? They make me free." None of them spoke. Even Lily had gone pale. I left the table then, closed my bedroom door behind me. The stew smell lingered in the air, thick, cloying, like regret. I sat on the bed and breathed. For the first time in years, I felt something like power stirring beneath the grief. Not revenge. Not yet. Just the quiet knowing that this wasn't the end of my story. Through the wall, I heard them whispering again, their voices small and uncertain now. I smiled, just slightly. They could keep laughing if they wanted. The next time, I'd be the one writing, the script. It started with the drawer. The old oak desk in Michael's study had been his father's. I'd given it to him years ago, thinking sentiment would mean something to him. It didn't. Now it sat in the corner of his office, buried under unopened mail and coffee stains. One morning, while they were all out, Michael at work, the girls running errands, I went looking for my medical file. The doctor had mentioned needing updated forms for insurance, and I remembered leaving the envelope somewhere near that desk. I wasn't snooping, not at first. But it's funny how truth hides in plain sight, waiting for the right ache to make you brave enough to see it. The top drawer stuck for a moment, before sliding open with a low groan. Inside, beneath a stack of bills and receipts, I found a folder with my name written on it. M. Turner. Property and Assets. For a moment, I thought it was something routine. Maybe a file he'd kept to help manage my paperwork. But when I opened it, the world narrowed to the sound of my own pulse. There it was. Bank statements with my account numbers. My savings, half of what I'd thought was there, withdrawn in steady, deliberate increments over the past year. Then the house deed. My house. The one I'd worked 25 years to pay off. The name on the title wasn't mine alone anymore. It read, Joint Ownership. Michael Turner and Margaret Turner. I stood there staring at the words, the ink slightly faded but still sharp enough to cut. I read them again and again, waiting for some explanation that wouldn't come. The date told the rest of the story. 6 months before my surgery. Before the helpful suggestion that I move in with him. Before I'd trusted him with my passwords, just in case. I sank into his chair, the papers shaking in my hands. Michael hadn't been taking care of me. He'd been taking inventory. I don't know how long I sat there, the silence pressing down on me. I tried to reason it out. Maybe he'd meant to protect me. Maybe it was a precaution. But each thought withered under the evidence. My eldest son had turned my vulnerability into opportunity. I searched the drawer again, desperate for something to contradict what I'd seen. Instead, I found an email printout. His name. His lawyer's name. A line that read, Transfer complete. Client confirmed joint ownership as discussed. My stomach turned. I looked for Emma's name, for Lily's, hoping they were innocent in this. But in another folder labelled Family Affairs, I found notes in Michael's handwriting. Emma agrees with consolidation plan. Lily will come around. Come around. As if I were property to be voted on. My chest felt tight, but not from fear, from fury. I hadn't been a mother to them lately. I'd been an account to manage, an asset to secure. I put everything back where I found it, careful to leave no trace. Then I went to my room, locked the door, and sat down with my cane across my lap like a weapon. My reflection in the mirror didn't look shocked, just tired. I whispered to it, So this is who they are. And then softer, This is who I was, the woman who made them believe she'd never fight back. It's strange how betrayal clarifies things. The noise falls away. The excuses, the guilt, the years of second chances, they all go quiet. What's left is clean, sharp resolve. That night, I tested them. Small things. I asked Michael about my accounts, pretending to forget a detail. He smiled, patient and condescending. Don't worry about that, Mum. I'm managing everything now. He even patted my hand. It took everything in me not to flinch. Lily was quieter than usual. When I caught her alone in the kitchen, I asked gently, "Did your brother tell you about the bank changes?" She froze, a second too long, then said, "It's just temporary, Mum. He said you wanted him to handle it while you recovered." Her eyes darted away, shame flickering behind them. She knew. And Emma? I called her the next morning, asked about the paperwork. She sighed and said, "Mum, you're making it sound worse than it is. Michael's just trying to keep things organized. You can't manage finances right now, not after everything." Her tone was rehearsed, steady, the voice of someone who'd chosen comfort over conscience. That's when the last thread of hope snapped. I waited until nightfall, the house silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. I pulled out an old notebook, one I used to jot grocery lists in, and began writing. Not memories, plans, dates, names, numbers, a map of my own life and how to take it back. They thought they'd cornered me, that I was too fragile to notice, too tired to care. But I wasn't the one who'd forgotten what I was capable of. I'd raised 3 children through grief and poverty. I'd kept a roof over their heads when the world told me I couldn't. I knew how to rebuild from nothing. This wasn't their story anymore. It was mine again. And the first step was simple. Undo everything they'd stolen. Quietly. Let them believe they were still in control. Let them laugh one more time. Because when I finally stood up, I wanted them to see the full cost of mistaking silence for surrender. It's remarkable how calm anger can feel once it cools. In the weeks after I found those papers, I stopped trembling. I stopped hoping. I moved through the house like a ghost, learning her own walls. Silent, unseen, but watching everything. They thought I was slipping into frailty. What I was really doing was taking inventory. Michael kept all his important documents in that desk. I now knew every folder by sight. Emma called every other day to sound dutiful. Lily avoided me, but guilt made her clumsy. She'd leave her phone on the counter when she went to answer the door, messages still, glowing on the screen. "Don't tell her yet." Or, "We'll handle it when she's stable." Stable. Like I was a patient, not a person. I didn't confront them again. Not yet. Rage is a poor strategist. I needed precision. The first step was the bank. I waited until my follow-up appointment at the clinic, where my neighbour Gloria, an old friend from my nursing days, worked part-time. She'd always been sharp as a tack, the kind of woman who knew everyone's business without ever gossiping. "Gloria," I said, lowering my voice after she finished changing my dressing, "I need a good lawyer. Quiet one." Her eyes narrowed, that nurse's instinct kicking in. "You in trouble, Maggie?" "No," I said. "Not yet." She gave me a number on a folded napkin. "Tell her I sent you." She's discreet. The name was Rita Lawson, an attorney who specialized in elder financial abuse. I called the next morning from a payphone outside the pharmacy. I didn't trust the landline anymore. Her voice was calm, firm, unbothered. "Bring everything you've got," she said, "and don't tell your family you're coming." Meeting her felt like remembering an older version of myself, the woman who used to advocate for patients no one else listened to. Rita didn't pity me. She listened, pen scratching fast as I laid out the papers, the withdrawals, the title transfer. When I finished, she looked up and said, "They think you're cornered. That's good. People make mistakes when they underestimate you." I liked her immediately. We spent the next 2 hours quietly detonating their safety net. She helped me open new accounts, separate from the joint one, filed paperwork to revoke all power of attorney rights. She drafted letters to each institution, holding my assets, requesting security freezes. Once this goes through, she said, they won't be able to move a dime without your consent. I felt my lungs expand for the first time in months. But I didn't stop there. Justice without meaning felt hollow. I wanted to turn the rot into something good. So I made another appointment, this time with the community foundation in town. I asked about local charities helping single mothers and women leaving abusive homes. When I told them I wanted to donate, the young coordinator looked startled. "Are you sure, Mrs. Turner? That's quite generous." "I'm sure," I said. "I spent my life giving to people who only took. It's time the giving meant something." We began setting up a scholarship fund in my name, small at first but growing. Enough to help women like I once was, trying to keep children fed and dignity intact. Meanwhile, I started preparing my escape. I'd been collecting little things, unnoticed, copies of medical records, keys, photographs, small cash withdrawals from my pension. I kept them in an old biscuit tin under my bed. I also began calling around for rentals, using the payphone again. Found a modest apartment 2 towns over, near the sea. Nothing fancy, just sunlight, silence, and the smell of salt air. The landlord didn't ask questions. I liked that about him. Every night, I rehearsed what I'd say when I finally walked out. Not to hurt them, that would have been too easy, but to leave a mark deeper than rage. I wanted them to see the vacancy they'd built for themselves. Lily came into my room one evening while I was folding laundry. She hovered in the doorway, twisting her hair. "Mum," she said softly, "you've been quiet lately. Are you mad at me?" I looked at her, really looked. She wasn't cruel, just afraid of choosing sides. I sighed. "No, sweetheart, just thinking." "About what?" "About what happens when people mistake kindness for weakness." She didn't know how to answer that. I didn't expect her to. After she left, I finished packing the small suitcase I'd been hiding in the closet. Just the essentials. Documents, cash, a few clothes, and my husband's wedding ring. I slid the zipper shut and whispered, "Soon." By the end of that week, everything was in motion. Legal protections filed, accounts secured, will rewritten, power of attorney officially reassigned to no one. Rita called to confirm. "You're all set," she said, "but you'll need to tell them at some point." "Oh, I will," I replied, in my own way. The plan wasn't about vengeance. It was about restoration, pulling back everything they'd siphoned from me, one signature at a time. They'd wanted control. I'd given them a lesson instead. When I hung up, I opened the window. The air outside smelled like rain and iron. Sharp, clean, alive. I stood there with the cane resting against my leg and thought, they'll never see it coming. I invited them over on a Sunday afternoon, the same day Daniel used to call Family Day. It felt poetic, predictable. They never said no to anything that sounded like it might involve inheritance or control. "Just a small family talk," I told them, "about the future." Michael perked up at that. Emma sounded cautious. Lily only said, "Okay." I spent the morning setting the table, not with food this time, but with papers. Neat stacks in front of each chair. Rita's copies. I brewed coffee, the smell of it winding through the house, soft and deliberate. It almost smelled like peace. When they arrived, the tone was off from the start. Emma's professional smile, Michael's calculated warmth, Lily's quiet guilt, each one wearing a different mask. "Mum, what's all this?" Michael asked, looking at the folders. "Something we should have done a long time ago," I said. "Go ahead, sit." I waited until they were all settled before I began. My voice was steady, even bored. "I wanted to thank you," I said, "for everything you've done these past few months. It's been enlightening." Michael chuckled, already smug. "You don't need to thank us, Mom. Family takes care of family." "Yes," I said. "That's what I used to believe too." I watched the confusion flicker across his face. Emma frowned. Lily's eyes darted to mine, searching. "I met with a lawyer," I continued, sliding the first folder toward Michael. She helped me go over some things. Bank accounts, property titles, the will. You'll notice a few updates. He flipped open the folder. At first, his face didn't move. Then his mouth opened, just slightly. What is this? The official revocation of power of attorney, I said. Filed last month, effective immediately. You have no legal control over my finances, my accounts, or my medical care. Emma leaned forward. Mum, you didn't even talk to us about… I did, I said. For 40 years, you just never listened. Michael's face went red. You can't just… I can, I interrupted. And I did. I turned to Emma. You'll find a copy of my new will in there too. Everything I own, including the house, is being transferred to charitable trusts over the next year. The scholarship fund is already registered. It'll go to single mothers trying to rebuild their lives. Emma blinked. You're giving everything away? You've lost your mind. No, I said, smiling faintly. I finally found it. Lily stared at her papers like they were a confession. Her lips parted. The house. Gone? I said. It's not mine anymore, or yours. It'll be a women's shelter by next spring. Michael slammed his folder shut. You're being manipulated. Someone's taking advantage of you. I laughed, a sound that startled even me. If anyone's been manipulated, son, it's you. You thought my silence was consent. It wasn't. It was strategy. He stood, pacing. Do you have any idea what you're doing? You're destroying the family. The family destroyed itself the night you stole from me, I said. My tone didn't waver. I found the papers, Michael. The withdrawals. The title transfer. The lies you fed your sisters to keep them quiet. You built your comfort on my exhaustion. He froze mid-step. Emma went pale. Lily started to cry, soft and broken. I didn't stop her. Some tears deserved to fall. You think I'd let that stand? I asked quietly. After everything I've survived? Silence filled the room. The only sound was the clock ticking. That same clock that used to mark homework deadlines and bedtime stories. Now it counted down the end of their illusions. I gathered my own folder, closed it neatly. I've made arrangements for myself. I'll be moving soon. You won't need to worry about me. You won't be able to. Michael's jaw clenched. Where? Somewhere peaceful, I said. Somewhere that doesn't echo with other people's laughter. Emma reached for me then, maybe out of habit, maybe out of guilt. Mum, you don't have to do this. We can fix it. I met her eyes. You can't fix what you never valued. When I stood to leave the table, I felt lighter. I didn't even need the cane. Lily tried to follow me into the hallway. Mum, she whispered, please don't go. I didn't mean… I know, I said softly, turning to her. That's the worst part. And then I walked out, leaving them behind in the kitchen, surrounded by their empty cups and their broken certainty. Through the window, I could see them still sitting there, 3 grown adults who'd just realized the woman they'd dismissed had outmaneuvered them completely. They had stripped me of dignity. I'd stripped them of control. Fair trade, I thought. That night, at my new apartment, I unpacked slowly. 1 suitcase, 1 photograph of Daniel, 1 pot of rosemary for the windowsill. I made tea and sat by the window, watching the last bit of sun slide off the horizon. My hands still shook a little, not from fear, but from release. I'd won, yes, but it wasn't about winning. It was about finally living without permission. I whispered into the empty room. You did it, Maggie. The words felt strange, new, and entirely mine. They found me eventually. They always do. By then the sea had already softened my edges. Mornings belonged to tea and the sound of waves hitting stone. I rented a small flat near the coast. 1 window, 1 chair, 1 life that finally felt like mine. I grew rosemary in a chipped pot and learned to sleep without waiting for footsteps in the hall. The scholarship fund had begun sending letters, stories from women rebuilding after being abandoned, just as I once was. One wrote, "Because of you, I can start over." I read that line twice, then folded it carefully and placed it beside my cup. And then, one grey afternoon, someone knocked. Michael stood on the doorstep, Thinner? His voice lower. Mom, he said, as if saying it for the first time. You look… well, I am, I said. He glanced past me into the tiny space. This where you live now? Yes, it suits me. He tried to smile. I just wanted to check in. Maybe talk. About what? He sighed. You blindsided us. You didn't give us a chance to make things right. I leaned against the doorframe. You had years of chances. You used them to take. His eyes flickered. Shame, anger, confusion, all fighting for room. I'm sorry, he said finally, but it sounded rehearsed. I hope one day you mean that, I said, and closed the door softly. Emma came 2 weeks later. She brought expensive coffee and that polished tone she used at work. You can't keep freezing us out, she said. We made mistakes, but we're still family. No, I told her. Family isn't people who use you until you break. It's the ones who notice before you do. She tried tears. They didn't move me. Michael said, you're donating everything. Are you sure? You're leaving us nothing. I'm leaving you accountability, I said. Spend it wisely. When she left, her eyes looked older than mine. Lily came in winter, carrying a paper bag of groceries. Her hands shook as she set them down. I didn't stop them, she whispered. I should have. I studied her face. The same softness she had as a child, dimmed by guilt. Fear makes cowards of good people, I said. But you don't have to stay one. Tears slid down her cheeks. Can I visit sometimes? Only as Lily, I said. Not as my caretaker? Not as my judge? She nodded. When she hugged me goodbye, she held on too long, as if hoping I could absolve her. I didn't. Some forgiveness is silent. After that, quiet settled again. They stopped coming, replaced by letters, apologies wrapped in excuses. I didn't answer. The absence was my reply. I spent my days in the garden, coaxing herbs to grow from tired soil. The air smelled of salt and wet earth. I read the newspaper cover to cover. I laughed with strangers. No one asked for anything. Peace, I learned, doesn't roar. It hums. The Turner House opened in the spring, a converted home for women rebuilding after loss. They sent me photos, children playing in the yard, a small plaque by the door with my name. For the first time, I felt my giving land somewhere it was needed. The director called to thank me. You've changed lives, she said. No, I answered. I've reclaimed mine. She didn't know what to say to that, and she didn't need to. Sometimes guilt knocks again, wearing different faces. It whispers, they're still your children. Yes, they are. But being someone's mother doesn't mean surrendering your spine. Love without respect isn't love. It's servitude. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about letting people back in. It's about letting yourself leave without apology. I forgave them quietly one morning while folding laundry. I didn't send a letter. I just stopped waiting for them to understand. The sea is rougher tonight, foam white against the rocks. I sit by the window, tea in hand, and think about all the women who'll walk through the doors of that shelter, carrying their own cracked versions of love. They'll learn what I did, that worth isn't proven through sacrifice, and peace isn't given, it's claimed. I used to think justice meant revenge. Now I know it's simply the right to live unafraid. I turn off the lamp and let the dark settle. The tide keeps moving, steady and endless. They took my kindness for currency. I whisper into the quiet, the words shaped like release, until I stopped paying the price.